In the secluded village of Umudike, darkness has taken root. Men have become obsessed, driven to madness by an irresistible curse that no one understands. At the center of the chaos is Amara, a young healer who finds herself the unwilling target of every man's desire. But this is no ordinary curse. It is the work of the vengeful night spirit, a dark deity who demands Amara as his bride. Desperate to break free, Amara embarks on a perilous journey into the heart of a forbidden forest, guided only by fragments of ancient lore and the whispers of a prophecy long forgotten. With the full moon fast approaching, she has mere days to uncover the secrets hidden in her bloodline and confront the malevolent spirit who claims her soul. But every step she takes reveals deeper betrayals. As she unravels the truth behind her village's dark past, Amara must face impossible choices, sacrifice those she loves, or surrender herself to the darkness. The night spirit's grip tightens, and the price of freedom may be more than she can bear. In a tale of love, betrayal, and supernatural forces, Amara must confront her greatest fears to save her village, or risk losing her soul forever. Will she break the curse in time, or will the shadows claim her as their own? Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. Amara's lungs burned as she sprinted through the dusty village streets. The evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out, trying to ensnare her like the frenzied men chasing at her heels. Sweat dripped down her forehead, and her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she pushed herself to run faster. "Amara, wait!" A man's voice cried out, desperate and pleading. She didn't dare turn to look. She knew who it was: Obinna, a man she once trusted. His cries had once been friendly, but now they were tinged with a dark hunger that sent chills down her spine. The sound of pounding feet grew louder, the cries of the men intensifying. It was as if the entire village had gone mad overnight. "Leave me alone," she screamed, her voice cracking with exhaustion. She turned sharply around a corner, ducking into a narrow alleyway, her breaths coming in short, frantic gasps. But there was no escape. Behind her, she could hear the men clawing and shoving each other, their desire for her turning them into animals. Amara's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Just yesterday, these were the same villagers who greeted her with warm smiles and friendly conversations. What had changed? Why did every man in the village now look at her with eyes clouded by an uncontrollable, ravenous lust? She reached her small hut at the edge of the village and slammed the door shut behind her. For a moment, she leaned against the door, her body trembling as she tried to catch her breath. But the reprieve was short-lived. The men's shouts were getting closer. The door shuddered as someone pounded on it. "Amara, please, let me in." Kelechi's voice was hoarse with desperation. He was a childhood friend, someone who had always been kind to her. But now, even he was ensnared by whatever curse had befallen the village. Tears stung Amara's eyes as she bolted the door. "Kelechi, go away. Please, just leave me alone." But Kelechi's voice was relentless. "Amara, I can't control it. I need to see you. Let me in before the others take you from me." The wooden door creaked under the weight of the men pushing against it. Amara's hands shook as she reached for one of her herbal pouches on a nearby shelf. In a last-ditch effort, she threw the contents, a sleep-inducing powder, through the small cracks of the door. The powder spread into the air, and within moments, the pounding on the door subsided, followed by the heavy thuds of bodies collapsing to the ground. For now, they were asleep. But Amara knew it wouldn't last long. She had to figure out what was happening before the entire village tore itself apart over her. Her mind flashed back to last night. It had been a quiet evening like any other. She had been preparing her herbal remedies when she heard it, the whisper. A deep, seductive voice that seemed to drift through her window like a warm breeze, caressing her ears. "You will be mine, Amara," the voice had murmured, smooth as honey. "Before the full moon rises, you will belong to me." At first, she thought it was a trick of her mind, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But when she awoke the next morning, the nightmare had become reality. Every man she encountered looked at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. What was once friendly banter turned to lewd suggestions, and simple greetings became desperate pleas. Now, here she was, trapped in her own home, pursued by men who had once been her friends. Suddenly, the whispers returned. The deep voice resonated in her mind, clearer this time, almost as if the speaker was standing right behind her. "They won't stop, you know," the voice taunted. "No man in this village can resist you now. And when the full moon rises, you will be mine." Amara clutched her head, trying to block out the voice, but it was relentless, filling her mind with images of a shadowy figure reaching out to her. She could feel a cold, spectral hand grazing her cheek, even though she was alone in the hut. "No," she shouted, pressing her palms to her ears. "Leave me alone." The voice only laughed, a deep, resonant sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "You can run, my dear, but you cannot hide. The curse will draw them to you, and when they fail to satisfy you, you will come to me." The whispers faded, leaving her in trembling silence. She knew she couldn't stay here. She needed answers. Desperate, Amara grabbed her cloak and slipped out through the back of her hut, hoping the men outside were still unconscious from her sleep powder. She made her way to the village square, where the elders often gathered. They were her last hope. But as she arrived, a group of angry villagers, mostly women, blocked her path. Their faces were twisted with rage and jealousy. "Witch," one of them screamed. "What have you done to our men?" "It's not me." Amara tried to explain, but her words were drowned out by the angry shouts. The women began to close in on her, and she could feel the tension in the air growing thicker. Just as one of them reached out to grab her, the village elders appeared, their staffs thudding on the ground to command silence. "Enough!" Elder Okaro bellowed. "Let the girl speak." Amara, her voice shaking, tried to explain the strange events of the past day. But the elders' faces remained grim. Elder Okoro stepped forward, his eyes dark with concern. "Amara," he said, "we have seen curses like this before. If it is not lifted before the full moon, you will be lost to him." Amara's heart sank. "Him? Who are you talking about?" Before the elder could answer, the ground beneath her feet seemed to sway, and Amara collapsed. As darkness enveloped her, she heard that voice again, whispering with cruel delight. "The clock is ticking, my bride." Amara awoke with a start, her head pounding as if someone had driven a stake through her skull. The world around her was a blur, but as her vision cleared, she found herself lying on a straw mat in a dimly lit room. The familiar smell of herbs and incense filled the air, and she realized she was in the elders' sacred hut, a place rarely visited except in times of crisis. "Thank the gods, she's awake," a voice muttered nearby. Amara turned her head to see Elder Okoro standing at the foot of the mat, his wrinkled face etched with worry. The other elders, 5 in total, stood behind him, their expressions grim. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. "How long have I been out?" Amara asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Only a few hours," Okoro replied, stroking his long, white beard. "You collapsed in the square, overwhelmed by the curse." Amara struggled to sit up, her limbs heavy as if weighed down by an invisible force. "I need to understand," she said urgently. "Why is this happening to me? Why have the men gone mad?" The elders exchanged wary glances. Finally, Elder Adana, the only woman among them, stepped forward. "What you are experiencing is no ordinary curse, child," she said softly. "It is the work of the Night Spirit, a vengeful deity who was wronged by our ancestors centuries ago." The name sent a chill down Amara's spine. "The Night Spirit," she whispered, recalling the sinister voice that had haunted her dreams. Okoro nodded solemnly. "The legend says that he was once a powerful warrior betrayed by his beloved. Consumed by rage, he transformed into a spirit of darkness, cursing her descendants. That curse has now fallen upon you." Amara's mind spun. The Night Spirit, the whispers, it all began to make a dreadful kind of sense. "But why me?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I've done nothing to deserve this. Elder Adana's eyes softened. The curse isn't about what you have done, but about who you are. You are the last of your bloodline, Amara, the only one who can break the curse. The spirit has chosen you to be his bride, and if you do not accept him by the next full moon, our village will be doomed. The words hit her like a physical blow. His bride, she gasped. I would rather die than marry that monster. Elder Okoro's face darkened. It may come to that, he said gravely. The spirit's hold on you is growing stronger. Each day that passes, the men of our village will become more frenzied. They will tear each other apart if you do not submit to him. Amara felt a surge of panic. The thought of becoming the bride of a dark spirit was horrifying, but even worse was the idea that her refusal would lead to the destruction of her village. There must be another way, she pleaded. Some way to lift the curse without giving in to him. The elders exchanged looks again, their silence heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Elder Okaro sighed. There is one possibility, he said slowly. But it is dangerous and uncertain. You must find the lost talisman of the moon goddess. It is said to possess the power to break any curse. Hope flickered in Amara's chest like a fragile flame. Where can I find it? She asked eagerly. That we do not know, Okaro admitted. The talisman was hidden long ago in the Forbidden Forest, a place where even the bravest warriors fear to tread. It is guarded by creatures loyal to the night spirit. Many have gone in search of it, but none have returned. Amara's heart sank. Venturing into the Forbidden Forest alone would be suicide. But what choice did she have? If she stayed, the curse would only grow stronger. The full moon was only 7 days away, 7 days before the night spirit claimed her forever. I will find it, she declared, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. I will break this curse. The elders looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pity. You are brave, child, Adana said softly. But be careful. The night spirit will not let you go so easily. He will try to seduce you, to lure you into his grasp. Amara clenched her fists. Let him try, she said fiercely. I will never be his. But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the lingering memory of the spirit's whispers, the way his voice had caressed her mind like a lover's touch. Deep down, she feared that it was not only the men in the village who were falling under his spell, but herself as well. The elders escorted her out of the hut, the dying light of the evening casting long shadows over the village. As she walked back to her home, she felt the eyes of the villagers upon her, some filled with hatred, others with hunger. The men she passed reached out, their fingers grasping the air as if trying to pull her towards them, but she hurried past, keeping her gaze fixed ahead. When she reached her hut, she found Kelechi waiting for her outside. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he tried to hold himself back. Amara, please, he whispered, his voice thick with yearning. I don't want to hurt you. But I can't stop myself. Amara's heart ached for him. Kelechi had been her friend since childhood, and now he was reduced to this, a slave to the curse that bound them all. I'm going to break this curse, Kelechi, she promised, stepping back to put distance between them. But you have to fight it. You have to resist. Tears filled his eyes, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of the old Kelechi, the gentle, kind boy she had grown up with. But it was quickly replaced by the shadow of the curse, his gaze turning dark and possessive. I'll try, he stammered before stumbling away, his fists clenched at his sides. As the last light of day faded into darkness, Amara knew that she was running out of time. The full moon loomed closer with each passing day, and the whispers in her mind were growing louder. She had 7 days to find the talisman, 7 days to save herself and her village from the grip of the night spirit. But as she closed the door to her hut, she couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how far she ran, the spirit was always one step behind her, waiting for the moment when she would finally succumb. Amara awoke before dawn, the echo of the night spirit's whisper still reverberating in her mind. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. The full moon was only 6 days away, and if she did not find the talisman, she would be lost forever. With the village men under the curse's grip, she knew she had to leave before the sun rose, before they awoke with their twisted desires. Slipping out of her hut, she pulled her hood over her head to obscure her face. The village was eerily quiet at this hour, but she could still feel eyes watching her from the shadows. Fear gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. She had to stay focused. There was only one person she could turn to now, Chima, her childhood friend who knew the ancient legends better than anyone. Amara made her way through the darkened streets, avoiding the main paths and sticking to the narrow alleys. She reached Chima's hut just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. She knocked softly on the door, praying that he would answer. The door creaked open, revealing Chima's familiar face, though his eyes were hollow with exhaustion. "Amara," he said, surprise and concern mingling in his voice. "What are you doing here? It's dangerous for you to be out." Amara stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. "I had no choice, Chima. The elders told me about the talisman of the moon goddess. They said it's my only hope to break the curse." Chima's expression darkened. "The talisman. It's only a legend, Amara. Many have searched for it, but none have returned." "I don't have any other options," she insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "If I don't find it before the full moon, the night spirit will claim me. I need your help, Chima." For a moment, Chima looked as though he might refuse, but then he sighed and nodded. "All right. If the legends are true, there is one place where we might find clues, the shrine of the lost spirits in the Forbidden Forest." Amara's eyes widened. "The Forbidden Forest? That place is cursed. No one who enters ever returns." Chima gave her a grim smile. "Exactly. Which is why it's the perfect place to hide something as powerful as the talisman. But it's our only chance." With a sense of renewed purpose, Amara gathered her supplies. Chima handed her a small satchel filled with herbs and protective charms. "These may not be enough to stop the night spirit," he warned, "but they should help fend off his lesser minions." Just as they were about to leave, Chima hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Amara, are you sure you want to do this? There's no turning back once we enter the forest." Amara squared her shoulders, determination hardening her gaze. "I have no choice, Chima. If I don't find that talisman, everyone I care about will suffer. And I won't let the night spirit take me." Together, they set off towards the Forbidden Forest, the first rays of the sun casting a faint glow over the village. But as they reached the outskirts of the forest, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisted like gnarled hands reaching out to ensnare them. "Stay close," Chima whispered as they stepped into the shadowy depths of the forest. The air grew colder with each step they took, and the once cheerful sound of birdsong was replaced by an eerie silence. Hours passed as they navigated the dense underbrush, guided only by the faint light filtering through the canopy. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the scent of decay and dark magic. Amara's skin prickled with unease, but she pressed on, her mind focused on the talisman that could save her. Suddenly, the ground beneath Amara's feet gave way, and she tumbled down a steep embankment, landing hard on the forest floor. "Amara!" Chima's voice called out, panic lacing his words. Amara groaned, pushing herself up on shaky arms. She had fallen into a hidden clearing, surrounded by ancient stones etched with strange, glowing runes. In the center stood a crumbling shrine, its entrance dark and foreboding. Chima slid down to join her, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. This must be it," he whispered. "The shrine of the lost spirits." As they approached the entrance, Amara felt a cold breeze brush against her skin, carrying with it the faintest whisper of the night spirit's voice. "You are so close, my bride," the voice taunted. "But you cannot escape me." Chima lit a small lantern, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the shrine. The air inside was thick with the scent of ancient incense and decay. As they ventured deeper, the runes on the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, illuminating their path. But just as they reached the inner chamber, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Amara's heart skipped a beat as she recognized him, Kelechi, her childhood friend who had been so desperately trying to possess her. Kelechi. Amara's voice trembled with shock. What are you doing here? Kelechi's eyes were dark, devoid of the warmth they once held. I've come to claim what is rightfully mine, he said, his voice twisted with the curse's influence. The night spirit promised me power beyond imagination if I delivered you to him. The revelation hit Amara like a blow. Chima, who she thought was her ally, suddenly lunged at Kelechi, knocking him to the ground. But as Kelechi fell, a dark shadow seemed to pour from his body, enveloping Chima. What's happening? Amara screamed, backing away in terror. Chima turned towards her, his eyes now glowing with an unnatural light. It's too late, Amara, he said, his voice now echoing with the same sinister tone as the night spirit's. You see, I was never trying to help you. The night spirit sent me to ensure you would come here, where you belong. Amara's blood ran cold. Chima had betrayed her all along. The one person she had trusted was, in fact, the night spirit's puppet, leading her right into a trap. The shadowy tendrils reached out for Amara, pulling her toward the altar. You were destined to be mine, Amara, the night spirit's voice echoed through the shrine, triumphant and cruel. Now, let the ritual begin. As the darkness closed in around her, Amara's mind raced. She had to find a way out before it was too late, but she was running out of time, and the full moon was only 6 days away. Amara's mind was a whirlpool of confusion, betrayal, and fear as she fled the dark shrine. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she forced herself to keep running. The forest closed in around her like the jaws of a beast, branches clawing at her cloak as if trying to pull her back to the cursed altar where Chima had revealed his treachery. You cannot escape me, Amara, the night spirit's voice whispered, carried on the cold wind that swept through the trees. She could still feel the sinister tendrils of his power lingering on her skin, a cruel reminder that he was never far behind. Panting heavily, she paused by a twisted oak tree, her body trembling. The events in the shrine replayed in her mind, the way Chima's eyes had glowed with a malevolent light as he revealed his true allegiance. For years, she had trusted him, shared her fears and dreams with him, only to find that he had been a pawn of the night spirit all along. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. Now was not the time for sorrow. She was running out of time. Only 6 days remained until the full moon. If she didn't find the talisman, the night spirit would drag her into the spirit realm, and her village would suffer in his wake. She pulled herself together and scanned her surroundings. The forest was dense and foreboding, with twisted trees that seemed to watch her every move. Somewhere in these depths lay the talisman that could save her, but without Chima's guidance, she was on her own. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and she nearly lost her balance as the earth trembled. Amara gripped the rough bark of the tree, her heart racing. The forest itself seemed to pulse with dark magic, as if the night spirit were reaching through the roots and soil to ensnare her. In the distance, a chorus of howls pierced the air. Amara's blood ran cold. The night spirit's minions were closing in on her. She had to keep moving. Grimly determined, Amara adjusted the strap of her satchel, checking the herbs and charms Chima had given her before his betrayal. She only hoped they would be enough to fend off whatever creatures lurked in the darkness. Pressing forward, she stumbled through the underbrush, her senses heightened by adrenaline. The deeper she ventured, the colder the air became, and the once vibrant forest turned into a twisted nightmare of gnarled branches and thick fog. Each step felt like she was being pulled further into the night spirit's domain. Hours seemed to blur into one another as she navigated the forest. At one point, she thought she saw the flicker of lanterns ahead, only to realize they were will-o'-the-wisps, dancing lights meant to lure travelers to their doom. She kept her gaze averted, refusing to let the supernatural lights seduce her into losing her way. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog, a tall, cloaked figure standing in her path. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Was it another of the night spirit servants? She took a cautious step back, her hand reaching into her satchel for one of her protective charms. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her gut. The figure lowered its hood to reveal the weathered face of an elderly woman with piercing eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. "I mean you no harm, child," the woman said, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "I have been waiting for you." Amara's eyes narrowed. "How do you know who I am?" The old woman smiled, revealing teeth that were far too sharp. "I am Neka, the guardian of this forest," she said. "I have been watching you since you entered these woods. You seek the talisman, do you not?" Amara's heart leaped at the mention of the talisman. "Yes," she said cautiously. "But how do you know that? And why would you help me?" Neka's eyes gleamed. "The night spirit's curse has plagued this land for far too long," she replied. "I do not wish to see another innocent soul taken by his dark hunger. But be warned, the path you tread is fraught with peril. If you wish to find the talisman, you must first prove yourself worthy." Amara swallowed hard. "What must I do?" Neka pointed to a dark, narrow path that wound deeper into the forest. "Follow this path to the cursed grove," she said. "There, you will find the guardian beast who protects the entrance to the chamber where the talisman is hidden. You must defeat it to proceed." Amara's blood turned to ice. "A guardian beast? But I have no weapons, no allies." The old woman's smile widened. "You will have only your wits and your courage, child. But remember this, things are not always as they appear in the spirit's domain. Trust in your instincts, and you may yet survive." Before Amara could ask anything else, Neka's form shimmered and dissolved into the mist, leaving her alone once more. The forest seemed to grow darker, as if the trees themselves were closing in around her, urging her to turn back. But she couldn't afford to hesitate. The full moon was approaching, and she was running out of time. Clutching the charms in her hand, Amara steeled herself and headed down the dark path that Neka had pointed out. The forest seemed to swallow the light as she ventured further, the air thick with the scent of rot and decay. Every nerve in her body screamed that she was walking into a trap, but she pushed on, her thoughts focused on her village and the people who depended on her. She could not, would not, fail them. Just as she reached the edge of the cursed grove, she heard the sound of something large moving in the darkness ahead. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the air was filled with the scent of damp fur and decay. Amara's heart pounded as she saw the outline of a massive creature emerging from the shadows, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. The guardian beast towered over her, its maw dripping with saliva as it snarled, ready to attack. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had no weapons, only the herbs and charms in her satchel. But Neka's words echoed in her mind. "Trust your instincts." As the beast lunged, Amara quickly scattered a handful of the herbs at its feet. A thick, acrid smoke billowed up, causing the creature to recoil with a roar of pain. But as the smoke cleared, the beast's eyes locked onto her again, more enraged than ever. Amara braced herself, knowing that this was only the beginning of the challenges she would face. She had no choice but to fight. Her village, her freedom, and her very soul depended on it. Amara's heart pounded as the guardian beast's roar filled the air, reverberating through the forest like a clap of thunder. The acrid smoke from her herbs had only slowed it down momentarily, but now it was more enraged than ever. Its eyes glowed with an unholy red light, its massive jaws snapping as it prowled closer, muscles rippling beneath its mangy fur. She couldn't afford to panic. The words of Neka echoed in her mind. Things are not always as they appear in the spirit's domain. Trust your instincts. Amara took a deep breath, trying to still her racing heart. The beast lunged again, and she barely dodged its massive paw, which slashed through the air where she had stood moments before. The ground beneath her feet shook as its claws gouged deep furrows in the earth. "Think, Amara, think." She frantically rummaged through her satchel, her fingers brushing over various herbs and charms. None of them seemed capable of stopping a creature as powerful as this one. But then, her hand closed around a small vial filled with a silvery liquid, the essence of Moonlight, one of the rarest substances in her collection. Desperation gave her courage. She pulled out the vial and hurled it at the creature's face. The glass shattered, and the liquid sprayed across the beast's eyes. The effect was immediate. The creature let out an ear-splitting howl, rearing back as if it had been struck by lightning. Wisps of smoke rose from where the liquid touched its fur, and the glowing red in its eyes flickered. Amara seized the opportunity and sprinted towards the twisted archway at the far end of the clearing. She didn't dare look back. She could hear the beast thrashing and snarling behind her, its roars shaking the very ground. But the moonlight essence had bought her a few precious moments, and she had to make them count. As she crossed into the archway, she found herself in a dimly lit cavern, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient decay. This had to be the entrance to the chamber Neka had mentioned. The talisman had to be close. But as she ventured deeper into the cavern, a strange, seductive warmth began to fill the air. It was almost like a caress, gentle fingers brushing against her skin. Amara shivered, instinctively knowing it was the night spirit. His presence was as oppressive as the darkness around her, whispering promises of power and pleasure. "You are strong, my beautiful Amara," the voice whispered, sending a shiver down her spine. "But you cannot deny the bond between us. Come to me willingly, and I shall grant you a life beyond your wildest dreams. Power, eternal beauty, anything you desire." Amara clenched her fists, trying to shut out the voice. She had no intention of surrendering to him, no matter what he offered. But his words stirred something deep within her, a flicker of desire she didn't want to acknowledge. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "I will never be yours." The night spirit's laughter echoed around her, soft and mocking. "Oh, but you will, my love. The closer the full moon draws, the stronger our connection becomes. You cannot escape me." Amara gritted her teeth and pressed on, refusing to let his words distract her. She couldn't afford to lose focus now. The cavern twisted and turned like a labyrinth, every corner leading to another shadowy passage. But she kept moving, driven by the faint glow of moonlight that seemed to seep through the cracks in the stone walls. Finally, she reached a vast chamber bathed in the soft, ethereal light of the moon filtering through a crack in the ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and atop it lay the talisman, a small, intricately carved amulet that seemed to pulse with a soft, silvery light. Relief flooded Amara's chest. She had found it. She raced towards the pedestal, but just as her fingers brushed the talisman, a wave of darkness swept through the chamber, slamming into her like a physical force. She was thrown to the ground, her head spinning. When she looked up, the night spirit stood before her, his form a shifting mass of shadows and light. His eyes, glowing like twin embers, bore into hers with an intensity that sent her heart racing. "You truly are stubborn, aren't you?" he purred, his voice a low, seductive murmur that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. "But it's that fire that draws me to you, Amara. You belong to me, and no talisman will change that." Amara struggled to her feet, clutching the talisman in her hand. "I will never belong to you," she spat, her voice trembling with defiance. "This talisman is the key to breaking your curse." The night spirit laughed, a sound both beautiful and terrible. "Oh, my dear Amara," he said, stepping closer until she could feel the cold, otherworldly energy radiating from him. "The talisman can only break the curse if you are willing to sacrifice what you hold most dear." His words sent a chill through her. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. The spirit's smile widened. "To wield the talisman's power, you must sacrifice a pure soul, someone who truly desires you. Only then can you sever our bond." Amara's heart sank. A pure soul? Her thoughts immediately turned to Kelechi, the friend who had betrayed her under the curse's influence. Despite everything, she knew that somewhere beneath the curse, he still cared for her. But could she really sacrifice him, even to save herself and her village? "You see, my love," the night spirit whispered, circling her like a predator, "you will find that breaking this curse requires a darkness even you may not possess. But embrace it, and you shall have everything you desire." Amara gripped the talisman tightly, her knuckles white. The price was too high, but if she didn't act, the night spirit would consume her and her village would be doomed. She had to make a choice and time was running out. "Decide quickly, my bride," the night spirit taunted, his voice like velvet and shadows. "The full moon is only 5 days away. Soon, you will be mine. Willingly or not." Amara's eyes filled with tears, her heart heavy with the impossible choice before her. But she would not give in, not yet. Gritting her teeth, she turned and fled the chamber, the talisman clutched tightly in her hand. As she raced back through the labyrinth of the cavern, the night spirit's laughter echoed behind her, a dark promise that their game was far from over. The air in the forest was colder than before, biting into Amara's skin as she ran. The night spirit's laughter still echoed in her ears, his mocking words circling in her mind like a relentless storm. She had the talisman in her hand, but its power came with a price she was unwilling to pay. A sacrifice of a pure soul, someone who truly desired her. The thought was almost too cruel to bear. How could she take a life, even if it meant saving her own? But with the full moon only 5 days away, she had little time to find another solution. As she stumbled through the dense underbrush, her thoughts kept turning to Kelechi. Despite his earlier betrayal, she couldn't forget the years of friendship they had shared. Was there still hope of saving him, or was he already lost to the night spirit's curse? Pushing those thoughts aside, she focused on navigating the forest. The deeper she went, the darker and more twisted the trees became, as if they were reaching out to trap her. She needed a safe place to rest and think, but every rustle in the bushes made her heart race. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Amara's blood turned to ice. She spun around, clutching the talisman, ready to use its power if necessary. "Amara, wait," a familiar voice called out. It was Chima. He emerged from the shadows, his face pale and eyes wide with panic. "Thank the gods I found you," he said, panting as if he had been running for hours. "You don't understand what's happening." Amara's grip on the talisman tightened. "Why should I trust you, Chima? You betrayed me. You were working with the night spirit all along." Chima's eyes filled with tears. "I had no choice," he pleaded. "The night spirit, he had my family. He threatened to destroy them if I didn't bring you to him." Amara's heart wavered. The pain in Chima's eyes seemed real, and she wanted to believe him. But after everything that had happened, how could she be sure? "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, her voice shaking. "You led me into that trap." "I know," Chima admitted, his voice filled with regret. "But I'm here to help you now. Please, Amara, you have to believe me. The night spirit is stronger than you think. If you try to face him alone, he will consume you." Amara's instincts screamed at her to run, but something in Chima's voice made her pause. Could it be that he was truly trying to redeem himself? Or was this another trick? Before she could decide, a loud crash echoed through the forest, followed by guttural growls. Amara's blood froze. She turned to see dark shapes moving through the trees, eyes glowing like fiery coals. "The night spirit's minions," Chima whispered, fear tightening his voice. "We have to go. Now." Without waiting for her response, he grabbed her arm and pulled her along, urging her to run. The ground shook beneath their feet as the monstrous creatures closed in, their snarls and growls growing louder. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed herself to keep up with Chima. They weaved through the forest, jumping over roots and dodging branches, the sound of the creatures never far behind. Finally, they burst into a small clearing surrounded by towering stone pillars. Chima skidded to a stop, turning to face Amara. "This is the safest place I know," he said, breathing heavily. "The night spirit's minions cannot enter here." Amara looked around, her instincts on high alert. "How do you know that?" she asked, suspicion creeping back into her voice. Chima hesitated, glancing away. Because this place was once sacred to my family. It's protected by ancient magic." Before Amara could question him further, a low growl echoed from the trees. Dark shapes circled the clearing, their glowing eyes fixed on her. But they didn't cross the boundary of the stone pillars. They can't come in, Chima insisted, stepping closer to her. We're safe here. Amara's eyes narrowed. Something felt off. The creatures outside the clearing paced restlessly, snarling in frustration, but they made no move to enter. Why would the night spirit's minions respect the boundaries of this place? Her thoughts were interrupted as Chima reached into his cloak and pulled out a dagger, its blade gleaming in the dim light. Amara's heart skipped a beat, and she took a step back. Chima, what are you doing? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. His expression shifted, his eyes hardening. I'm sorry, Amara, he said, his voice suddenly cold. But the night spirit promised me freedom if I delivered you to him. Chima had been playing a double game all along. He hadn't come to help her, he was here to finish the job he had started. The clearing wasn't a place of safety, it was a trap. Amara's mind raced as Chima advanced on her, the dagger gleaming in his hand. You were never on my side, she whispered, her voice filled with betrayal. I tried to save you, Chima said, his voice cracking with emotion. But the night spirit's hold on me, it's too strong. If I don't deliver you to him, he'll destroy everything I hold dear. Amara's hands tightened around the talisman. The realization hit her like a blow. Chima's desire to protect his family had twisted into something darker. He was willing to sacrifice her to save them. I won't let you take me, Amara said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She raised the talisman, feeling its power surge through her. This ends now. Chima lunged at her, but Amara was faster. She chanted the words Elder Adana had taught her, unleashing a burst of energy from the talisman. A blinding flash of light erupted between them, sending Chima flying backward. The creatures outside the clearing howled in agony as the light spread, forcing them to retreat into the shadows. Amara stood over Chima, who lay dazed on the ground, his eyes wide with shock. I'm sorry, Chima, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. But I can't let you betray me again. Before he could recover, she turned and fled the clearing, disappearing into the forest. Her heart was heavy with the knowledge that she had left a friend behind, but she couldn't afford to look back. The full moon was only 4 days away, and the night spirit was growing stronger. She had the talisman, but now she knew the price it demanded. She would have to make a sacrifice, but it wouldn't be her soul. She was determined to find another way, no matter what it cost her. Amara's breath came in ragged gasps as she fled deeper into the forest, her heart heavy with Chima's betrayal. The full moon was only 4 days away, and she was no closer to breaking the curse that bound her to the night spirit. The talisman she carried pulsed with power, but its sinister demands weighed heavily on her mind. Sacrifice a pure soul. That was the price to break the curse. But who could she condemn to such a fate? Even after all his betrayals, sacrificing Chima had felt wrong. There had to be another way. As she navigated the dark, twisted paths of the forbidden forest, Amara's instincts told her she wasn't alone. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the night spirit's minions lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing but the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. A soft light flickered in the distance, barely visible through the thick trees. Amara hesitated. It could be another trap, but she had nowhere else to go. Desperation and exhaustion drove her forward. If there was even a small chance of finding help, she had to take it. The light grew brighter as she approached, revealing a clearing bathed in an ethereal glow. At the center stood a small, weathered hut, surrounded by strange symbols etched into the ground. Amara's heart quickened with a mix of fear and hope. Whoever lived here had to possess powerful magic to ward off the night spirit's minions. As she reached the entrance, the door creaked open, revealing an old woman with long, silver hair and eyes that seemed to glow with a faint, otherworldly light. Amara froze, unsure whether to trust this stranger. Come in, child, the woman said, her voice soft yet commanding. I have been waiting for you. Amara hesitated but stepped inside. The interior of the hut was filled with shelves overflowing with ancient scrolls, jars of herbs, and mysterious artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingled with something earthy and old. "Who are you?" Amara asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The old woman smiled, revealing teeth that were unnaturally sharp. "I am Neka, the keeper of these woods," she said. "I have watched your journey from afar, and I know why you are here." Amara's eyes widened. "You know about the curse?" Neka nodded, her expression turning serious. "Yes, child. The night spirit has chosen you to be his bride, and the full moon approaches swiftly. But the talisman you carry is only a piece of the puzzle." Amara's heart sank. "I was told the talisman could break the curse, but it demands a sacrifice." "I can't," her voice broke. "I can't condemn an innocent soul." The old woman's eyes softened. "There is another way, but it is hidden deep within your bloodline. You carry the power to break the curse, but it will require great sacrifice, not of another's life, but of your own." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Neka gestured for Amara to sit. "Long ago, your ancestor betrayed the night spirit. The curse was not only his revenge, but a bond that ties his fate to yours. The power to break it lies within your very soul, but it will not come without a price." Amara's mind spun. "So, you're saying that I can break the curse without sacrificing someone else?" Neka nodded slowly. "Yes, but to do so, you must embrace the darkness within you. The night spirit feeds on fear and desire. Only by confronting him in his realm can you sever the bond between you." A chill ran down Amara's spine. "His realm? You mean I have to go to the spirit world?" "Precisely," Neka said, her eyes glinting. "But the path is treacherous and few have ever returned. If you fail, you will be trapped in the spirit world forever." Amara's hands trembled as she clutched the talisman. She had never imagined that the path to freedom would require such a sacrifice. But if it meant saving her village and her own soul, she had no choice. "How do I get there?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Neka stood and walked over to a dusty, ancient scroll on a nearby shelf. She unfurled it, revealing a map filled with strange symbols and drawings. "There is a portal deep in the heart of the forest, where the veil between the mortal world and the spirit realm is thinnest. But be warned, the night spirit will know the moment you enter his domain." Amara nodded, determination hardening her resolve. "I have to try. I can't let him take me or destroy my village." The old woman placed a bony hand on Amara's shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. "You have a brave heart, child, but remember, the night spirit will use your fears and desires against you. Trust in your instincts, and you may yet survive." Before Amara could respond, Neka pressed a small, intricately carved stone into her hand. "Take this," she said. "It is a key to the portal, but it will also protect you from the night spirit's illusions. Use it wisely." Amara looked down at the stone, feeling its strange warmth pulse in her palm. "Thank you," she whispered, overcome with gratitude. "I won't forget this." Neka's eyes gleamed with a hint of sadness. "Go quickly, child. The full moon is only 3 nights away, and the night spirit grows stronger with each passing hour." Amara nodded and turned to leave, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. As she stepped back into the darkness of the forest, the weight of her mission pressed down on her shoulders. She was no longer just fighting for her own life, she was fighting for the souls of everyone she loved. But even as she ventured deeper into the forest, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that Neka's warning had been more than just advice. The night spirit would stop at nothing to claim her, and now that she had the key to enter his realm, she knew he would be waiting for her. The forest seemed to close in around her, the shadows lengthening as the light faded. The closer she got to the portal, the more the air hummed with dark energy. Amara's pulse quickened, her grip tightening on the stone Neka had given her. Ahead, through the thick underbrush, she saw the faint glow of the portal, a shimmering, ethereal light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The path to the spirit world was open, but it would be a journey unlike any she had ever faced. And if she failed, there would be no escape. The air in the forbidden forest seemed to shift the moment Amara crossed the threshold into the portal's glowing light. The world around her blurred, the trees and ground melting into a swirl of shadowy mist. The sensation was disorienting, like stepping into a dream or a nightmare. Amara's heart pounded as she felt herself being pulled forward, the light around her intensifying. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. She was no longer in the familiar forest of her world. Instead, she stood at the edge of a vast, otherworldly landscape bathed in the cold light of a ghostly moon that hung far too low in the sky. The air here was different, heavy with an unnatural stillness. The ground beneath her feet was a dark, cracked surface, pulsing faintly with red veins, as if the earth itself was alive. Shadowy forms slithered just beyond her line of sight, whispering secrets in a language she could not understand. Amara clutched the stone Neka had given her, its warmth a comforting presence in this cold, eerie place. This must be the spirit realm, she whispered to herself, her breath visible in the frigid air. The portal had transported her to the night spirit's domain, where she would have to face him on his own ground. As she ventured forward, her footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the land was mocking her every move. The landscape was a twisted reflection of her world, familiar shapes distorted into grotesque versions of themselves. Trees with limbs like skeletal hands reached out for her, and the air was filled with the faint, mournful cries of lost souls. Despite the fear gnawing at her, Amara forced herself to keep moving. The talisman pulsed at her side, reminding her of the urgency of her mission. She had only 3 nights before the full moon, and the night spirit's power would be at its peak. If she failed, she would be bound to him forever, her soul lost to darkness. Ahead, she spotted a structure rising from the mist, a massive stone archway covered in ancient runes that glowed faintly. This had to be the entrance to the night spirit's lair. As she approached, the runes flickered, casting an eerie glow over her face. Just as she reached the archway, a figure emerged from the shadows. Amara's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the tall, familiar form. "Kelechi," she whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. Kelechi stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and longing. "Amara, I didn't expect you to come this far." Amara's relief quickly turned to suspicion. "What are you doing here? How did you get into the spirit realm?" Kelechi's expression darkened. "The night spirit brought me here. He promised to free me from the curse if I convinced you to surrender." Amara's hands tightened into fists. "So you're still trying to betray me?" she asked, her voice cold. Kelechi shook his head, stepping closer. "No, Amara. I didn't want any of this. But the night spirit. He showed me visions of what he would do to our village if I failed him. I thought I could protect you." Amara's heart ached at the anguish in his eyes, but she couldn't afford to let her guard down. She had been betrayed too many times already. And now, she demanded, "Are you here to drag me to him?" Kelechi's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked like the boy she had once trusted. "No, I came to warn you. The night spirit knows you're here, and he's preparing for your arrival. This place, it's filled with traps. He will use your worst fears against you." Amara's resolve hardened. "I don't care what he throws at me. I'm going to break this curse." Kelechi's eyes flashed with something unreadable. "There's something else you need to know. The talisman, it's only powerful in the hands of someone who willingly sacrifices their greatest desire." Amara's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "If you want to use the talisman to break the curse, you'll have to let go of the one thing you want most in this world," Kelechi said softly. "And for you, Amara, that might mean letting go of the village you're trying so hard to protect." Amara's blood ran cold. The thought of sacrificing her village to save herself was unthinkable. But before she could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The runes on the archway flared with a blinding light, and Kelechi was thrown to the ground. Amara tried to reach for him, but a powerful force pulled her toward the archway. She struggled against it, but it was like trying to swim against a raging current. Kelechi's voice was lost in the roar of the wind that seemed to come from nowhere, his figure fading into the darkness. As she was dragged through the archway, the world around her twisted into a nightmare. Shadows twisted into monstrous shapes, and the air was filled with agonized screams that pierced her ears. The ground beneath her feet was no longer solid. It was as if she was walking on the surface of a storm-tossed sea. "You are mine, Amara," the night spirit's voice whispered, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You cannot escape me here." Amara gritted her teeth, clutching the talisman to her chest. "You can try to break me, but I will not surrender," she shouted into the darkness. The night spirit's laughter echoed, low and mocking. "We shall see, my bride. The deeper you go, the more you will have to sacrifice. And in the end, you will beg to be mine." The ground gave way beneath her feet, and Amara plunged into a void of swirling shadows. She fell for what felt like an eternity, her screams swallowed by the darkness. And then, just as suddenly, she landed on solid ground. The air here was different, thicker, suffocating. She was in a massive hall, its walls lined with flickering torches that cast grotesque shadows. The night spirit's throne loomed at the far end, carved from black stone and adorned with the skulls of those who had failed him. Amara pushed herself to her feet, her eyes blazing with determination. This was it. The final confrontation. She could feel the talisman pulsing with power at her side, but she knew it would not be enough on its own. She would have to face the night spirit and confront the darkness within herself. The throne room was eerily silent, but she knew he was there, watching her. The shadows seemed to ripple with anticipation as she took a step forward. "Show yourself," Amara shouted, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I'm not afraid of you." A dark, swirling mist began to gather before her, coalescing into the tall, imposing figure of the night spirit. His eyes glowed like burning embers, and his smile was as cold as death. "Welcome, my bride," he said, his voice a low, seductive whisper. "You've finally come to me." Amara's heart raced, but she refused to let him see her fear. "I'm here to end this," she declared, raising the talisman. "I will break your curse and free myself from your grasp." The night spirit's laughter filled the hall, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Oh, my dear Amara," he purred, stepping closer. "You will find that breaking the curse is far more difficult than you could ever imagine." Amara stood her ground, clutching the talisman tightly, her heart racing as the night spirit's laughter echoed through the vast, shadow-filled hall. His form wavered like smoke, shifting between solid and ethereal. The air was thick with dark energy, suffocating her resolve. But she couldn't afford to show fear now. The full moon was only 2 nights away, and this was her last chance to break the curse. "So brave, my dear Amara," the night spirit said, his voice a soft, seductive murmur that seemed to seep into her mind. "But bravery alone will not save you. Do you truly believe you can defy me with that trinket?" Amara raised the talisman, letting its silvery glow cast a faint light across the throne room. "This is the key to breaking your curse," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I won't let you take me, and I won't let you destroy my village." The night spirit's eyes narrowed, his smile fading. "You still do not understand, do you?" he hissed, stepping closer. "The talisman holds great power, yes, but only if you are willing to pay its price." Amara's heart clenched. She had heard those words before, but now, standing in the heart of the spirit realm, she could feel the weight of their meaning pressing down on her. "What is this price?" she demanded. "What must I sacrifice?" The night spirit's smile returned, dark and cruel. "The talisman requires a willing sacrifice, a soul that truly desires you," he said softly, circling her like a predator stalking its prey. "The stronger their desire, the greater the power you can wield. Without that sacrifice, you will never break our bond." Amara's mind raced, her thoughts filled with the faces of those who had fallen under the curse's influence. Kalechi Chima. Could she truly condemn one of them to save herself? The thought was abhorrent, yet the alternative was to surrender to the night spirit and condemn her village to ruin. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't do that. I won't sacrifice someone else to save myself." The night spirit's laughter filled the hall once more, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Such noble words, my dear," he taunted. "But let us see how strong your resolve truly is." With a wave of his hand, the shadows around them twisted and shifted, revealing a scene that made Amara's blood run cold. She was no longer in the throne room, but in the heart of her village. The familiar huts were in flames, the air thick with smoke and the cries of her people. Men and women she had grown up with were writhing on the ground, their faces twisted with agony as the curse consumed them. Amara's heart twisted in her chest. "No, this can't be real," she murmured, tears stinging her eyes. But deep down, she knew it was. The night spirit's power was reaching beyond the spirit realm, spreading chaos and despair in her absence. "If you surrender to me, I will spare them," the night spirit whispered in her ear, his breath cold against her skin. "But if you continue to defy me, their suffering will only grow." Amara clenched her fists, the talisman's glow flickering in her grasp. She wanted to believe that there was another way, but the weight of the lives at stake crushed her hope. Was this the price of her defiance? Was her stubborn refusal to submit causing the very destruction she sought to prevent? "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't let you win." "Then you must choose," the night spirit said, stepping back to watch her struggle. "Sacrifice someone who desires you, or surrender yourself. Either way, you will belong to me." Amara's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. She couldn't bring herself to sacrifice Kelechi or Chima, no matter what they had done. But if she didn't act quickly, her entire village would be lost. As she stood frozen with indecision, a familiar voice called out her name. "Amara, don't listen to him." Amara turned to see Kelechi stumbling toward her, his face pale but determined. He had somehow followed her into the spirit realm, defying the night spirit's influence to reach her. "Kelechi." Amara's voice trembled with shock. "How did you?" "I won't let him take you," Kelechi said, his voice raw with emotion. "Even if it means sacrificing myself." The night spirit's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Ah, the noble fool returns," he purred. "Perfect. A willing sacrifice. Do you see now, Amara? The choice has been made for you." Amara's heart ached as she looked into Kelechi's eyes, filled with a desperate kind of love. If she used the talisman now, she could break the curse, but at the cost of Kelechi's soul. The night spirit's trap had closed around her, leaving her with an impossible choice. "Kelechi, no," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't do this. I can't let you die for me." Kelechi stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. "Amara, if it's the only way to save you, then it's worth it." The talisman pulsed with power, responding to Kelechi's willingness to sacrifice himself. Amara could feel its energy surging, ready to break the curse if she accepted his soul. The night spirit watched with hungry eyes, his smile widening. "Do it, Amara," the night spirit urged. "Use his love to set yourself free." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she held the talisman. She had come so far, faced so many horrors, but she couldn't bring herself to condemn Kelechi. There had to be another way. Then, a thought struck her, a gamble that might just save them all. The talisman required a willing sacrifice, but it didn't specify that it had to be someone else's soul. What if? Steeling herself, Amara closed her eyes and focused all her will into the talisman. "I won't sacrifice Kelechi," she declared. "If a soul is required, then take mine." The night spirit's eyes widened in shock as the talisman flared with a blinding light. The power surged through Amara, enveloping her in a halo of pure energy. She screamed as the force tore through her, the pain nearly unbearable. But she held on, channeling everything she had into the talisman. The shadows around her began to dissipate, the night spirit's form flickering as if he were being torn apart. "No, this is not how it's supposed to end," he roared, his voice filled with fury. Amara's vision blurred, her strength draining away. She could feel her soul unraveling, the talisman consuming it to break the curse. But as the night spirit's power shattered, the dark hold over her village faded. The last thing Amara saw before the darkness claimed her was Kelechi's anguished face, calling her name. Amara awoke to the soft glow of twilight filtering through the dense canopy of trees. Her body ached, and every breath felt like fire burning through her lungs. She was no longer in the spirit realm but back in the forbidden forest. For a moment, she thought she had failed, that the night spirit had taken her after all. But as her senses slowly returned, she realized she was still alive, though barely. The talisman, now dull and cracked, lay beside her. Its once brilliant glow had faded, and it felt cold and lifeless in her hand. Amara could barely move, her limbs weak from the toll of sacrificing part of her soul to break the curse. But she had done it. She had shattered the night spirit's hold over her. "Amara, you're awake." Kelechi's voice broke through her haze. He rushed to her side, his eyes filled with relief and guilt. "I thought I lost you." Amara managed a weak smile. "I'm still here," she whispered, though her voice was faint and strained. "The curse, is it broken?" Kelechi nodded, helping her sit up. "Yes, the darkness over the village has lifted. The men have returned to their senses, and the crops have begun to grow again." But his eyes were dark with something unsaid. Amara's relief was short-lived as she noticed the grim expression on Kelechi's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Kelechi looked away, his hands tightening into fists. "The elders, they've been hiding something from you, something they've kept secret for generations." Amara's heart sank. She had suspected the elders knew more about the curse than they had let on, but now it seemed there was even more to the story. "What do you mean?" With Kelechi's help, she slowly rose to her feet, leaning heavily on him for support. "The elders have summoned you to the village square," he said, his voice tense. "They claim they want to honor you for breaking the curse, but I think they have other plans." Despite her exhaustion, Amara's resolve hardened. She had sacrificed a part of her soul to save her village. If the elders had betrayed her trust, she would make them answer for it. Together, they made their way back to the village. The once dark and twisted forest seemed to breathe with new life, the shadows retreating as the sun dipped below the horizon. But even as the forest brightened, a sense of dread gnawed at Amara's heart. When they arrived at the village square, the villagers were gathered, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. The elders stood at the center, their expressions inscrutable. Elder Okoro, the oldest among them, stepped forward, his staff thudding against the ground as he approached. "Amara," he said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "You have done what no one else could. You have broken the curse that has plagued our village for generations." Amara's eyes narrowed as she studied the faces of the elders. "But at what cost?" she demanded. "You knew about the curse all along, didn't you? You knew it was tied to my bloodline." A murmur ran through the crowd, the villagers exchanging confused glances. Elder Adana stepped forward, her eyes dark with regret. "Yes, Amara. We knew," she admitted. "But there is much you do not understand." Amara's fists clenched at her sides. "Then tell me," she said, her voice rising with anger. "What have you been hiding?" Elder Okoro sighed deeply, as if the weight of the secrets he carried had become too heavy to bear. "Many years ago, our ancestors made a pact with the night spirit," he began. "They promised him a bride from our village every generation in exchange for protection and prosperity. When your ancestor betrayed him, it set off a chain of events that led to the curse." Amara's heart twisted with fury. "So you knew I was the next bride all along," she said through clenched teeth. "You knew the curse would fall on me." Elder Adana's eyes filled with tears. "We had no choice, Amara," she pleaded. "If we did not fulfill the pact, the night spirit would have destroyed the entire village. Your bloodline was the only way to keep him at bay." Amara's vision blurred with tears of rage and betrayal. "You sacrificed me to save yourselves," she spat. "You used me as a pawn to protect your own lives." The elders bowed their heads, unable to meet her gaze. "We did what we thought was necessary to protect our people," Elder Okoro said softly. "But now the curse is broken and the night spirit is banished. You have saved us all." Amara shook her head, her heart heavy with the weight of their betrayal. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't save the village. I did. And I paid the price with a piece of my soul." The villagers gasped, whispering among themselves as the truth sank in. Amara's strength wavered, and she swayed on her feet. Kelechi rushed forward to catch her, his arms steadying her as she fought to stay conscious. "Amara, please," he whispered urgently. "You've done enough. Let them bear the weight of their own sins." But Amara shook her head. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "The village deserves to know the truth. The elders betrayed them, just as they betrayed me." She turned to the gathered villagers, her voice carrying across the square. "The curse was not just a punishment for one person's betrayal," she said. "It was the result of a pact made in secret, one that has cost us all dearly." The villagers' faces turned from confusion to anger as they realized the extent of the elders' treachery. Shouts erupted from the crowd, demanding answers, demanding justice. Elder Okoro raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "Enough," he shouted. "Yes, we made a pact. Yes, we sacrificed one of our own each generation. But it was the only way to survive." Amara's eyes blazed with fury. "No more lies," she shouted. "The curse is broken, but your actions will not be forgotten. You have betrayed your people for the last time." With that, Amara turned and walked away, Kelechi supporting her. The villagers' angry cries faded into the background as they made their way toward her hut. Exhaustion threatened to consume her, but she was driven by a newfound resolve. The night spirit was gone, but the scars he had left behind would not heal easily. The village had been saved, but at a terrible cost. And now it was time to rebuild, without the lies and betrayals of the past. Amara knew that her journey was far from over. The full moon was only a night away, and though the night spirit was defeated, she couldn't shake the feeling that his influence lingered like a shadow over her soul. The cost of her victory was still being paid, and she would bear its weight for the rest of her life. The night sky was a canvas of swirling darkness as the full moon rose, casting an eerie silver light over the village. Despite the victory Amara thought she had achieved, a deep sense of foreboding gnawed at her heart. The air was thick with a strange, oppressive silence, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Amara leaned against the doorway of her hut, exhaustion weighing down her every movement. Kelechi stood beside her, his eyes scanning the village for any sign of danger. The villagers had turned against the elders after the truth of their betrayal came to light, and though the night spirit's curse had been lifted, a dark shadow still lingered over them. "Amara, are you sure it's over?" Kelechi asked quietly, his voice filled with concern. "The night spirit. He's gone, isn't he?" Amara wished she could share his certainty, but something in her soul told her otherwise. The talisman she had used to break the curse lay cracked and lifeless, but she could still feel a faint, lingering pulse of dark magic within it. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "I sacrificed a part of my soul to break the curse, but I can still feel him. It's like he's waiting." Before Kelechi could respond, a cold wind swept through the village, extinguishing the torches that lined the square. The once clear sky clouded over, and the moon's light was swallowed by a darkness that seemed to bleed into the very ground beneath their feet. Amara's heart clenched in fear. She had felt this presence before, when she had faced the night spirit in his own realm. But how could he still have power here, in the mortal world? "Amara," a villager screamed, pointing toward the edge of the square. Amara's blood ran cold as she turned to see a familiar, shadowy figure emerging from the darkness. The night spirit's form wavered, half solid and half spectral, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light that sent chills down her spine. "I told you, my bride," the night spirit's voice boomed, echoing across the village square. "You cannot escape me. The sacrifice was not enough. You belong to me." Amara's heart pounded in her chest as the villagers screamed and scattered, fleeing in terror. Kelechi drew his dagger, stepping protectively in front of Amara. "Stay back," he shouted, though his voice trembled with fear. The night spirit's laughter was a dark, mocking sound that seemed to seep into Amara's very bones. "You thought you could defeat me with your pitiful sacrifice?" he taunted. "You only delayed the inevitable. Now, the full moon has risen, and our bond is stronger than ever." Amara's mind raced. How was this possible? She had sacrificed part of her own soul to break the curse, yet here he was, more powerful than ever. The talisman had been her last hope, and now it lay shattered and useless. The night spirit raised a hand, and tendrils of darkness erupted from the ground, wrapping around Kelechi and lifting him into the air. "Your little protector cannot save you now, my bride," he hissed. "I will take what is mine." "No!" Amara screamed, her voice raw with desperation. She couldn't let the night spirit take Kelechi. Not after everything they had been through. But without the talisman, what could she do? As if in response to her despair, the faint pulse of the broken talisman flared in her hand, sending a jolt of energy through her body. Amara gasped as a sudden realization hit her. The sacrifice she had made wasn't enough because it hadn't been complete. The night spirit's bond with her was still tied to the part of her soul that she had tried to preserve. If she wanted to truly break free, she would have to surrender everything. With a newfound resolve, Amara gripped the remnants of the talisman and stepped forward, her eyes locked on the night spirit. "You want my soul?" she shouted, her voice echoing with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Then come and take it." The night spirit's eyes narrowed, his triumphant grin faltering for the first time. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice tinged with confusion. Amara closed her eyes, focusing on the power deep within her. She could feel the remnants of the talisman's magic coursing through her veins, mixed with the essence of her own soul. If she couldn't use it to break the curse, she would use it to destroy the bond between them once and for all. "Amara, no!" Kelechi cried, struggling against the dark tendrils that bound him. "You'll die." But Amara was beyond fear. She had seen what the night spirit's darkness could do, and she would not let him take another innocent life. She poured every ounce of her remaining strength into the talisman, channeling the last of her soul's energy into a single, desperate strike. A brilliant light erupted from her hands, blindingly bright and searing. The night spirit screamed, his form writhing and distorting as the light engulfed him. The dark tendrils holding Kelechi disintegrated, dropping him to the ground. Amara felt her consciousness slipping away, the last of her soul burning away as she poured it into the talisman's shattered remains. The pain was excruciating, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to stop. The night spirit's form began to break apart, fragments of shadow and light tearing away from him as he screamed in fury. "No! This cannot be!" he roared, his voice fading as the light consumed him. With one final burst, the light exploded outward, shattering the darkness that had enveloped the village. The ground trembled, and the air seemed to hum with the release of powerful magic. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Amara collapsed to her knees, her vision swimming. She could barely feel her own body. It was as if she was floating on the edge of consciousness. The world around her was a blur of fading light and shadows. "Amara!" Kelechi's voice broke through the haze, and she felt his arms wrap around her, pulling her close. "Stay with me. Please, don't leave me." Amara managed a weak smile, her vision growing dim. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "He's gone." Kelechi's tears fell onto her cheeks as he held her, his grip tightening as if he could anchor her to the world. "No, you can't leave me." "You're not allowed," he choked out. But Amara knew the truth. She had given everything, her soul, her strength, to banish the night spirit. There was nothing left to keep her tethered to this world. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost swallowed by the wind. "For everything." And then, the darkness claimed her, pulling her into the depths of a peaceful oblivion as the moon shone brightly above, casting its silvery glow over the village that she had saved. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, bathing the village of Umudike in a soft golden glow. The air was still, filled with a profound silence that was both heavy and peaceful. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the curse that had plagued the village was truly broken. Villagers slowly emerged from their huts, blinking in disbelief as they realized the darkness that had hung over them was gone. The air was crisp and fresh, the morning dew glistening like diamonds on the grass. But amidst the relief and joy, there was also a profound sense of sorrow. In the center of the village square, Kelechi knelt beside Amara's still form, his hands trembling as he cradled her lifeless body. Tears streamed down his face unheeded as he whispered her name over and over, hoping in vain for a response. "She gave everything for us," Elder Adana said softly, her voice thick with emotion. The elders had gathered around, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt and gratitude. "Without her sacrifice, we would all be lost." Kelechi's heart ached as he gazed at Amara's peaceful expression. She looked almost as if she were merely asleep, her face serene despite the battle she had fought. The villagers began to gather around, their eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. They owed their lives to Amara, but the cost of their freedom was unbearably high. As the sun rose higher in the sky, a soft, ethereal light surrounded Amara's body. The villagers gasped in awe as the light grew brighter, enveloping her like a shimmering cocoon. Kelechi stepped back, shielding his eyes as the light intensified. "What's happening?" he whispered, his heart pounding with a desperate hope he barely dared to acknowledge. The light pulsed one last time, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. Amara's body seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, it looked as though she had taken a breath. Kelechi's eyes widened, his heart racing. "Amara," he called out, his voice filled with disbelief. Slowly, impossibly, Amara's eyes fluttered open. She gasped for breath, her chest rising and falling as if she were waking from a deep sleep. The villagers let out a collective gasp of astonishment. Kelechi was at her side in an instant, tears streaming down his cheeks. "You're alive," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Amara, I thought I lost you." Amara blinked, her mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. She remembered the darkness, the night spirit's final, desperate attempt to claim her soul, and then, nothing. But now, here she was, surrounded by the people she had fought so hard to save. "How?" she murmured, her voice barely more than a whisper. Elder Adana stepped forward, her eyes filled with awe. "You gave everything to break the curse, Amara," she said softly. "But the gods are merciful. They returned you to us because of your selfless sacrifice." Amara shook her head slowly, trying to make sense of it all. "I was supposed to die," she whispered. "I sacrificed my soul to destroy the night spirit." "Yes," Elder Okoro said, his voice thick with reverence. "But in doing so, you purified the darkness that bound him. You freed not just yourself, but every soul that was trapped by his curse." The villagers began to cheer, their joy uncontained as they realized that not only was the curse broken, but Amara had returned to them. For the first time in years, the village was truly free. But as the celebration grew around her, Amara's heart was heavy. Though she had survived, she could feel the emptiness where part of her soul had once been. The darkness was gone, but it had taken a piece of her with it, a piece she would never get back. Kelechi gently helped her to her feet, his hands steadying her as she stood. "You did it, Amara," he whispered, his voice filled with admiration. "You saved all of us." Amara nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "I did what I had to," she said quietly. "But there's still a part of me that's gone. I don't know if I can ever be the same." Kelechi's grip tightened on her hands. "You're not alone," he said fiercely. "Whatever you've lost, we will face it together. You're a hero, Amara. You brought hope back to this village." As the villagers gathered around her, thanking her, blessing her, Amara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't the same as the soul she had lost, but it was something new, a light that came from the people she had saved, from the love they had for her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she embraced Kelechi. I couldn't have done it without you." The villagers began to chant her name, lifting her up as a symbol of hope. Amara's tears flowed freely now, a mix of relief, sorrow, and gratitude. Though she would always carry the scars of what she had endured, she knew she had found something worth living for. As the celebration continued, Amara looked toward the sky, where the full moon still hung, now a symbol not of dread, but of new beginnings. The darkness that had threatened to consume her was gone, and though she would forever be changed, she was free. The village of Umudike would rebuild, the scars of the curse slowly healing with time. And Amara, though she had lost a part of herself, had gained something even greater, a family, a purpose, and a love that would guide her through whatever darkness came her way. As the sun rose higher, casting a warm light over the village, Amara smiled through her tears. She was not the same person who had first faced the night spirit, but she had emerged stronger. And with Kelechi by her side, she knew she would face whatever came next with the same courage that had saved them all.